Welcome to Paranormal or Reality. On today's video, we explore the haunting building in Montana, where visitors have witnessed a ghost wandering around. Then we are off to explore a haunted house in a small town in France, followed by the ghostly encounter of a haunted basement. Lastly, we hear the story of a ghost dog that still visits his owner. Now make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Let's begin. Last night was a bit of a scary experience, but I'm not sure what to think of it and wondered if anyone has had this happen before. Context: I had a beautiful Labrador who passed away about 4 years ago named Gucci. She was such a massive part of my life, and her departing this world broke me. Now I know that sleep paralysis is also a thing. I know it can happen in many forms, but part of me doesn't think what happened last night was it, as I was awake, able to move, and was fully conscious. So I was asleep for a few hours with my earphones in, listening to music, at around 4 a.m. I woke up to my music still playing, so I took my earphones out and put them on the side. About 5 minutes after, I'm still awake. I hear what sounds exactly like a dog walking up the stairs. The footsteps sounded just like how Gucci walked. She was slightly overweight, so she had a distinctive foot pattern walking, which then followed with the footsteps coming into my room and jumping onto my bed. She always used to sit tucked behind my legs, and that's exactly what I felt. In my mind at the time, I was like, oh, it's just Gucci. Then reality set in, and I realized she hasn't been with us for years. Here's the weird part, if it isn't weird already. I was lying with my hand out, and I could feel what felt like a cold dog head lying in my hand, accompanied with an intense pressure in my ears and head whenever whatever it was on my bed leant further against me. At this point, I just froze and told myself to go to sleep, which is what I did. This morning I woke up with my door shut and locked so whatever it was can walk through doors. I've spoken to family, they don't know either. My sister said it was just sleeping paralysis, but my mom thinks it was our beloved dog. I do believe in certain energies and forces when it comes to the afterlife, but I have never experienced anything like this before. I used to live in a small village of about 140 people, at the time, probably less now, in northeast France. We lived on the east part of that small village, which is basically a street. About 100 meters from our home was the home of the parents of my stepfather, let's call him SF, and right next to their house was the house that used to be the home of SF's great-parents' house, who both died long before my mom and I arrived in the village. It was the beginning of summer in 2013. The house of the great-parents of SF was now occupied by a Croatian man we'll call Mr. G, a very nice guy, who became good friends with my family, and still is to this day. He arrived in the house about a year ago. At that point, since it was summer, he left to visit his family in Croatia. So he asked us to watch his house while he was gone, which I did. I was 17 at the time. I would arrive at around 8 a.m. in the morning and leave around 11 p.m. It was a nice house with 2 floors. While I would spend 90% of the time on the first floor, I would sometimes have to go upstairs to go to the toilet. There was a toilet on the first floor, but it was full of spiders, and I'm afraid of those. One day, I was about to go back home, but before that, I had to go upstairs to go to the toilet. The second floor always felt a bit off at night, like you weren't supposed to be here, like you were perturbing someone or something. The second floor was composed of 4 rooms, 2 bathrooms and 2 toilets, 2 rooms and 1 bathroom and toilet on each side. I always used the toilets on the left though, as the one on the right didn't have any lights for some reason. Anyway, I go upstairs. The door of the toilet on the right is open, which gives off a creepy vibe as it is pitch black, but I decide to not pay too much attention. I enter the left side's toilets and do my business. Then, as I open the door to leave, I see on the toilet across the hall the face of a woman, or more precisely, the head on the toilet, as if it was put on it, looking at me, somewhat smiling. Not a maniacal smile, just a smile. That scared the living hell out of me. I just run out of here, leaving the lights on and my computer there. A little bit of backstory. Remember that I said that Mr. G arrived in this house about a year ago. Well, before he arrived, The house was bought by a family of two, who ended up having a third child while living there. They arrived in 2009, early 2010, and they left abruptly in 2012. The reason as to why they left are pretty sad. Apparently the father worked a night shift, and one night, the mother had a terrible headache, like bashing your head on the wall to calm the pain kind of headache. They didn't have any medicine for it, or at least it wasn't strong enough. At one point she has to get help, so she leaves her house and goes to her neighbors, SF's parents. Unfortunately, she would die on their doorstep. She died of a ruptured aneurysm. After that, the family left shortly thereafter, which is understandable. Also, remember that I said SF great-parents died long ago. Well, after the great father of SF died, his wife committed suicide shortly thereafter. She did so by jumping in the well that was located at the crossroads 20 feet or so down the street. The well was condemned afterwards. To this day, I'm not sure if it was a ghost or my imagination. If it was a ghost, I think it was probably the mother, and not the great mother of SF, as the face looked young, like in her 30s. I would continue to come each day, but I would leave earlier and not go upstairs after sunset after that day. So, for about 6 months, I rented out a basement from a family. I lived in another state for work. It was just convenient and cheap at the time, and worked out for everyone. The basement was unfinished, but had studs up where the walls would be. It had heat, but a cement floor. Living in the northern part of the United States during the winter, it regularly got quite chilly at times down there. So much so that I had 2 space heaters to keep me warm. The family who owned the house had quite a bit of stuff piled up in the basement as well. They were mild pack rats, not hoarder level, but you could tell they hadn't unpacked everything from their last move. Bags, boxes, and totes everywhere. I had the one central area to myself where I had my bed and TV set up, with a few chairs. It was like a small studio apartment. Anyways, I've had some paranormal experiences over my life. But this was on a new level. It began probably a couple months after I moved in. I started feeling uncomfortable, I guess is the best way to describe it, when I would go to bed for the night. I'm not usually one to be terrified of the dark, but I began to sleep with a light on in the next room over. Really, the only separation between my room and the next were the wall studs. Uncomfortable, like I didn't feel okay in the dark with my eyes closed. As weeks went on, I would sit down there and play Xbox or watch TV when I was not working. I would see a shadow move out of the corner of my eye, walking between the wall beams in the next room over. This was obviously concerning, but having had experiences before, I wouldn't say terrifying. Just like, oh, that's creepy. It was a fairly regular occurrence, maybe once or twice a week. Then the dreams started. I had recurring nightmares about a female apparition, very scary looking with long flowing dark hair. The dream always took place in a house I didn't recognize. I knew the spirit was in there with me, but I didn't know where. It would always jump from behind a corner and scare me. I would try to run away from it, but I couldn't move fast enough. Just before it gets me, I would snap myself awake. That was the worst part of my experience there. I would wake up shaken and out of breath. Finally, I asked the homeowner if anyone had ever told her that there was something in her basement. I remember her face went pale a bit. She told me that other people had reported things happening down there from time to time. There were some examples, but I don't recall what they were now. I do remember that she told me she had some belongings down there that once belonged to her first fiancé. He had killed himself many years prior, but she had hung on to some of his stuff. I found my own place shortly after, moved out. The dreams immediately stopped, no more shadows. It totally stopped after leaving. Thank God. Cousin and I were staying with some family in Deer Lodge, Montana for a bit one summer. The town is home to an old prison that's now a museum, and as 2 teens who were very into the paranormal, of course, we spent most of our time there. The first day we walked through all the buildings, it just felt like being in any other museum. Nothing scary other than the idea that it used to be a prison. We went down into the solitary confinement room. You stepped down a few steps into a medium-sized room that had a few individual solitary cells that were basically storage closet-sized and completely enclosed. And it almost seemed underwhelming. Like, okay, here's the solitary cells. The next day we went back, and on that day there was a huge storm rolling in. We were having fun running from one building to the next while trying not to get soaked, so we were relaxed having a fun time, and nothing felt scary this day either. When we went to go back into the solitary cell space, my cousin started her way down the stairs. I got to the top step and froze. Like I physically could not move forward. I just had this overwhelming feeling that we were walking into a room where people were fighting. Maybe not physically fighting, but like when you walk into a room and you can tell an argument had just been happening. The energy just felt intense and dangerous. I told her, "We can't go in there." She stopped and asked, "What?" And I told her, "We can't go in there. Something bad will happen." She immediately believed me and came back up the steps. We quickly went across the hall and sat down. I explained everything I felt and told her how I physically could not walk down the stairs. We agreed we probably wouldn't go down there again during the rest of our stay. I kind of wish we had, but at the time, the feeling of that room being so dangerous was strong. That same day, we went down into the guards' tunnels that ran through the whole main building. My cousin had paused and was looking down one of the side tunnels that were closed off. She was suddenly like, "Wait, I thought I saw someone." So we were looking down the hall when all of a sudden, a ton of rainwater came down through some sort of gutter and splashed on the floor at the end of the hall we were in. It scared the crap out of us. We rushed out of the tunnel and back into the main part of that building. We laughed at ourselves for being scared by rainwater. That night we were listening to the audio we had been recording that whole time on a tape recorder we borrowed from our grandma. In the audio, you could hear my cousin saying, "Wait, I think I saw someone." Me responding to her and us talking quietly. Then you hear the splash of water. Then us freaking out a little. Not full screams or anything, but we did vocally react. And you hear us rushing out. In the background was this extremely clear music like it was being played on a gramophone. There was a full tune to it, not just one or two notes. It stopped basically when we left the tunnel. There was absolutely no music playing in the building at all. I really wish we still had access to that recorder. Thanks for tuning in. Watch another video if you dare.